Hello everyone, welcome to another learning episode. Today I'll be sharing with you how to write the conceptual framework, specifically if we're doing a science investigatory project or we're doing an experimental research. Let us first define what is a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is a part of our research study that provides definition of the research variables, and it also shows the relationship between and among these variables. Now it has two parts. In a conceptual framework, we can see a schematic diagram, and there is also the textual explanation. Now, before writing our conceptual framework, the first thing that we're going to do is to identify first the variables in our research study. We'll start doing the conceptual framework by working on our schematic diagram. A schematic diagram, or it usually looks like an organizer because it's a diagram, it's a visual representation of the variables and its relationship in the study. So the first thing that we're going to do in our experimental research is to define or is to determine or identify our independent variable and dependent variable. So since our first step is to identify the variables in the study, or specifically the independent variable and the dependent variable, before we could work on our schematic diagram, I will give you a sample research title and let you identify which in the research title could be classified as the independent variable and which one could be classified as the dependent variable. This is our research title: Papaya seeds as alternative feeds for chicken. This one is one of the science investigatory projects conducted by our students before. So in order for us to identify easily the variables in the study, always remember that variables are the phenomenon being measured, or these are the entities being measured in the study. Now, in this research title, which do you think is the independent variable? When we talk about independent variable, it's a variable that is an agent of change. It means that it causes some change to the other variable. So which one, or which in this research title could be classified as the independent variable? Yes, the independent variable in this title is the papaya seeds, because it's the one that may cause, it's an agent of change, or it will cause an effect to the other variable. Now, since we already identify our IV, or the independent variable, let's proceed to identifying our dependent variable. Again, if the IV is the one that causes change, it is an agent of change. For the dependent variable, it actually experiences effect. It's just wait for the change to happen, or for the effect to happen. Now, which do you think is a dependent variable? Yes, the chicken, or the chickens, are our dependent variable, because they're just waiting for the change to happen with the intervention that we use. Since we're using papaya seeds as our source of feed, or as our alternative feeds, then the dependent variable, which are chickens, will happen to experience some changes as we go along the experimentation or the research study. Since we already identified the IV and the DV in this research title, I guess we're now ready to create our schematic diagram. The model of schematic diagram that we're going to use is the IV-DV model. The IV-DV model is one of the popular models we use when we're doing an experimental research, or simply we're doing a science investigatory project. Now, we're going to do is to prepare, or is to create two boxes where we're going to put our IV and DV. In the first box, we're going to put there our independent variable, which is the papaya seeds. And then on the second box, we're going to write it there, our dependent variable, which is the chicken. And then after that, we'll just give a space between these two boxes. And then in the middle, we're going to create a single arrow pointing toward the dependent variable, which is the chicken, because the chicken is primarily the one who will experience change because of the intervention we're doing, which are the papaya seeds. So this is technically how the IV-DV model will look like. It's just a simple illustration, but using this illustration, our readers, or the people who could follow our research, will understand that, okay, the papaya seeds is going to be implemented, or is going to be tested to the chickens, and the chickens will experience some effect along the experimentation process. Since we're already done with our schematic diagram, the next thing that we're going to do is to write our textual explanation. Of course, when I talk about textual explanation, it should be written in paragraph form, and it follows a certain format as well. Our illustration or our textual explanation must be related to the illustration or the schematic diagram that we have crafted. In this case, since this is our schematic diagram, the first few paragraphs in our textual explanation should explain or define the variables in our study. So we have to put it there, the definition of the papaya seeds. We have to make sure that we define it in a very specific manner. If we're putting papaya seeds as our variable, then we have to define specifically what papaya seeds are these. Are these dried papaya seeds? Are these fresh? Things like that. So you have to put it in our first few paragraphs, the specific definitions or the operational or even the conceptual definition of the papaya seed so our readers could be clarified. And then we also have to define the chicken. Are these native chickens? Are we using 45 days chickens? So things such as those, we have to put it in the first few paragraphs of our textual explanation. Since we already have explained thoroughly, comprehensively the definitions and the explanation of each of the variable of the independent variable and the dependent variable in our study, the next thing that we're going to write are paragraphs explaining the relationship between papaya seeds and the chickens. In this part of our paragraph or our textual explanation, we have to find literature, sources, author, backup sources that would help us identify the relationship between the two. Maybe we could also pinpoint theories or science concepts related to the relationship of these variables. We can also look for science principle. We could look for literature that will help us identify the properties or the components of papaya seed, which make it a good alternative feed for chickens. So that is how we're going to write our conceptual framework if we're doing an experimental research or if we are conducting a science investigatory project. Again, a conceptual framework defines the variables in the study and at the same time, it maps out the relationship between and among variables. It has two parts, the schematic diagram and the textual explanation. In doing our experimental research, we need to follow the IV-DV model, wherein it's just very simple. It just consists of our independent variable and the dependent variable, and you just point out an arrow pointing towards our dependent variable, showing the cause-effect relationship between the two. And once we're done with that, we can proceed to writing our textual explanation. In doing our textual explanation, we could start with our few paragraphs defining the dependent and the independent variables in our study. And after that, we need to explain thoroughly through literature and sources the relationship between the two or among the variables in our study. I hope you have learned a thing or two from this video discussion. See you on our next episode. Keep on learning!